I'm a Michigan man. I was born and raised in Traverse City, and though I've lived in DC and I now live near Chicago, Michigan will always have a special place in my heart. I've often told people that Michigan is an incredible state that only gets more beautiful the farther north that you go. But many people haven't been to the UP. So I want to give you a glimpse of the beauty that is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So join me. After spending the 4th of July with my family in Traverse City, I headed north. The drive was interesting. I passed a tree covered in discarded shoes and a roadside business selling giant concrete animals you can put in your yard. Michigan is full of surprises. I was going to include some dramatic footage of the Mackinac Bridge here, but unfortunately it was raining like crazy when I crossed. So here is an older picture I took of the bridge years ago. The bridge is definitely worth seeing in person. My first stop was at Tahquamenon Falls, Michigan's most impressive waterfall. For the sake of time, I only stopped at the upper falls, but the lower falls are also worth seeing, and you can actually wade in the river there. So make sure to check those out too. One interesting thing about Tahquamenon Falls is that the water often has a brown color that is caused by the tannins that come from the cedar trees in the area. For this reason, some people call it the Root Beer Falls. After a brief visit to Tahquamenon, I headed over to the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, where I would spend the rest of my first day. I drove straight to the Chapel Rock trailhead and started the 3-mile hike to the beach. The mosquitoes were thick, but the hike was otherwise enjoyable. About halfway to the beach, you find the beautiful Chapel Falls. There's a 60-foot drop in the falls here, and you can view the falls from multiple angles. When I arrived at Chapel Beach, the fog was thick on Lake Superior, so visibility was limited. But even then, the views were beautiful. How the UP came to be a part of Michigan is an interesting story. Before Michigan became a state, there was actually a dispute between Michigan and Ohio about who owned a tract of land called the Toledo Strip. This dispute led to the Toledo War, and although no one got shot, at one point rival militias did line up across the Maumee River and taunt each other. So a little context, the competition between Michigan and Ohio has been going on long before football was even a thing. Well, Michigan ultimately lost the Toledo Strip, but in compensation, Michigan was granted most of the Upper Peninsula as a consolation prize. Well, Michigan definitely got the better end of that deal. One of my favorite classes back in college was a Michigan Basin Geology course that I took at Northwestern Michigan College. And in that class, I learned that the lakeshore of Superior is made of ancient sandstone. Sandstone is softer than other rocks, and so things are always changing. Several collapses have actually occurred at the lakeshore, and some have even been captured on video. One of the most unique features about Chapel Rock is that there's a large white pine tree on top that has roots that extend back to the mainland. The tree is about 250 years old, and there used to be a rock bridge that supported the root structure. But back in the 1940s, this stone bridge collapsed. But the tree has adapted, strengthened its roots, and draws most of its nutrition from the mainland to this day. If you want to visit Pictured Rocks, you may want to consider going on a boat tour or a kayak tour. On less cloudy days, you can see the beautiful geological features from the water. There are also arches and small caves that you can kayak into. It really is a fun thing to do. Before leaving Pictured Rocks, I stopped by the Miners Castle Overlook. It's a gorgeous view at sunset or at any time of the day, really. I stood there for about 20 minutes and watched as the waves struck the rocks below. When it comes to accommodations, I'm not really picky. A few days before my trip, I got on Airbnb and reserved the cheapest accommodations I could find. It cost $60 a night. I stayed in a private room in a house occupied by a mother and her adult son. I got in about 9:40 and had some great conversations the first night. After my 27,000 steps that day, I slept well that night, and honestly, it was a much more enriching experience than staying at a hotel. At my older brother's recommendation, the next morning I got up and made the 2.5-hour drive to the Porcupine Mountains. The Porkies are a small mountain range in the far western side of the UP. Yes, Michigan does have mountains. The highlight for me was definitely the Lake of the Clouds viewing area. You can camp and hike in the Porcupine Mountains, and if you get up to the UP, I would definitely recommend spending some time there. Specifically, I would recommend hiking the Escarpment Trail. Copper mining is a significant part of Michigan history, and the Porcupine Mountains were a location for some of Michigan's copper mines. See, the electrical wires in your house may have been made from Michigan copper. There's an interpretive trail in the Porcupine Mountains that walks you through the history of mining in that area. It's a beautiful hike, and while you take in that history, you also take in some amazing views of the creek nearby. On my drive back, I made a quick stop at Bond Falls, which is one of Michigan's other really impressive waterfalls. The view is great and the hike is refreshingly short. The main viewing area of Bond Falls is also very accessible to those who have mobility concerns. And there are hiking trails on both sides of the falls for those who want to explore further. On my second day, I spent a lot of time on the road, but I made it back to the Pictured Rocks area just in time to see 2 waterfalls I had missed the day before. Wagner Falls is a really short hike, and Miner Falls is only about a half mile from the parking area. Both are really worth the walk. As I was driving back to my Airbnb, I saw the sun setting over Lake Superior, and I just had to pull over and take in the view. While I didn't see the northern lights while I was there, they are often visible on the north shore of Lake Superior. I've only seen them once back in Traverse City where I grew up. And when I got back to my place that night, I heard a pack of coyotes crying in the distance. When I got up the next morning, I spent some time talking with one of my hosts. He gave me a tour of his greenhouse, showed me the canoe he was building by hand, and gave me a couple of cookies for the road. I just had one more place to visit before leaving the UP. Kitchidakippy is the largest freshwater spring in Michigan, and it is located in the central part of the UP. It is a really popular tourist destination. I got there about noon, and I had to wait an hour to get on the raft that takes you over the spring. The water is clear, cold, it's about 45 degrees year-round, and trout swim in its waters. The big spring produces about 10,000 gallons of water per minute, and it rarely freezes over in the winter. The green color you see in the water below comes from the minerals that are found in the aquifer that the spring arises from. Well, there you have it. That was my whirlwind tour of the Upper Peninsula. And I hope that this video inspires you to visit the UP and enjoy firsthand the beautiful state that is Michigan. I'll see you there.